Thank you so much for joining us for this very special edition of Moving Minds webinar. Let's just get going immediately. And just to give you a quick introduction of White Swan Foundation. We are a not-for-profit organization which focuses in delivering knowledge services for mental health and well-being. It's been 6 years since we started our journey, and our focus area has been to make sure that people are educated, people have access to the right knowledge so that they make more informed decisions on mental health. White Swan has been running the Moving Minds series of webinars for some time now, and has increased its focus over the last 3 months, ever since we've been in lockdown and coronavirus entered our lives. Moving Minds webinar series has been providing opportunities for participants to directly interact with experts and among themselves on a wide range of topical, important, relevant subjects. You will find all our past recordings of the past editions of Moving Minds on our YouTube channel at White Swan Foundation. So please do have a look at it. And there's some very exciting and very interesting topics that have been covered in the past by experts, and you will find some of them very useful for your decision making on mental health care. Now, workplace and mental health. A lot has changed over the last 3 months for us, and our work life has not remained unaffected by the lockdown and the pandemic. People have been working from home, and there are yet people who have seen their work life really getting impacted in many other ways. But as we see government relaxing norms and encouraging people to come back to their work life and offices with a whole new set of measures and safety aspects, organizations have begun to ask as to what needs to be done on the ground from a physical space perspective so that employees feel safe for themselves and for their co-workers. In the same breath, some of the organizations have also begun to ask that how do I make my office emotionally safe for my employees? How do they feel that I think it is perfectly fine, I'm feeling safe, and I think I am ready to go back to my offices? And that was one of the questions many organizations came to us with. And we said this is a very interesting subject, and we must get experts to come and discuss this with us. Before we get our experts on board today, I also want to tell you that based on our interactions with some organizations and people officers and mental health experts, we have put together a very interesting ebook for you, which helps you with some of the recommendations that we have made on what organizations must do so that their employees feel emotionally safe to resume their work life from offices, from their factories or other spaces from where they have been working in the pre-COVID eras. So more on the ebook later, but let's just get into the panel discussion now. And I'm so happy that we have for our discussion today 2 very special guests who are people officers who've handled people functions in their lives and in their career. I would like to welcome Monica Pillai first. Monica is a people operations professional with nearly 20 years of work behind her. From creating and heading people operations functions for organizations to designing and facilitating life skills workshops, coaching and writing, Monica has done them all. As Monica explains about her career, the common thread that runs through her work is her passionate focus on well-being of the people and nurturing their growth. So welcome, Monica, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation, Manoj.
I'm also happy to have with us Pearl and Pearl Pantaki. Pearl is a global learning leader and wellness coach at EY GDS India, the Ernst & Young erstwhile name. She has designed and conducted wellness programs for thousands of employees. With more than 15 years of career spanning global geographies, Pearl brings in the rich understanding of cultural context, very important aspect, to employee well-being and growth. So welcome, Pearl, to this session for us.
Thank you so much for having me, Manoj.
Thank you. And so let's just dive straight into the topic of our discussion. Just to lay the land, let's just try and understand what have you been hearing about the impact in general of the pandemic and the subsequent lockdown that we've all experienced globally on the employees and workforces across industry. Pearl, may I begin with you?
Thank you, certainly, Manoj. So I think there are a combination of responses. Some people are very happy to be working from home. Some are frustrated. Some who were happy are beginning to get frustrated. And I was reading an article yesterday which actually said that 98% of people said they actually enjoy working from home. And some of the reasons for that is that they have more flexibility. They are able to work from any location. So someone like myself, I am based in Bangalore, but I'm stuck in Bombay. But I don't mind because I'm with family. You don't have that commute time as well, and also allows you time with family. So those are some of the positive scenarios. Some of the negative scenarios about working from home, I think, are your work-life balance. It gets a bit blurred. Sort of your weekdays merge into the weekends. Obviously, there's less collaboration with your teammates, with your colleagues. And I think there's more distractions. There's more things to do at home, especially when the maids and cooks were not coming. And I think, like I just had just now, issues with the technology. And I think people who have got kids who are starting online classes, sharing laptop resources. So I really feel it really is a personal response of how people are coping, and especially with working from home for a lot of the working professionals. It's mixed.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Pearl. And Monica, what are you hearing on the ground?
Sure. Thanks, Manoj. So to start off with, to echo what Pearl said, there is some amount of this is good. Everybody was really celebrating commute not being an issue, but I think now one of the most significant things I've heard is the loss of community in the form that it was in earlier. So, you could just walk up to somebody's desk and have a chat, really get a good sense of what other people are working on. And that adds to your sense of what's the organization doing. And, you feel connected to the organization as a whole. And that is one of the big things I think that people are struggling to say, how else do I get a sense of this? The other big one for me is people having conversations on productivity, especially productivity being on the decline, and reasons vary from I'm finding it hard to focus on work. There's fatigue with other coping mechanisms I'd put in place. So how many banana breads can I bake? Or people saying things like getting to the end of the week takes real effort. People asking questions like, Friday, end of day, I have a conversation with somebody. I don't feel I have the energy for it. So what's a respectful, professional way of communicating that? And these aren't questions or these aren't challenges that we were dealing with pre-March. So those are some of the big ones. In addition to, I think also the larger, set of questions on how safe is it for me to step out, buy groceries. There's second, maybe 2 degrees of separation, or maybe 1 degree of separation on number of people, on people I know who are tested COVID positive. So, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for them? So all of those fears are really coming home now. Yeah.
But Monica, are you also hearing any kind of emotional distress issues resulting out of those points that you made there?
Yeah, so I think generally sense of worry and anxiousness being one of the big ones, saying that there are all of these things happening, and there are some ways that my go-to mechanism of dealing with it, but just the fact that it's not seeming to let up being a really big one, saying, the old normal is not coming back. So that being a big one, saying we thought by June, by July, now we don't know. Um, and another big one, I think, from an emotional distress perspective, is possibly a feeling of being alone in this whole thing. So either, irrespective of whether I stay with family or with friends or alone, there's a huge sense of my problem and the way I am dealing with it is something that I'm dealing with completely on my own. So maybe it's unfair for me to expect other people to understand, or maybe people just won't understand. So anywhere on that spectrum. So there is a pervasive sense of sadness, of being alone, um, and possibly then further emotionally isolating ourselves, saying that, or in the workplace context, saying this is a professional environment, so these aren't conversations I can have with my colleagues or clients or anyone. So yeah,
Yes, yes.
those are big ones for me. Yeah.
Paul, from an organization perspective, how have you seen organizations reacting to these problems that we have been just narrating?
Sure, thank you, Manoj. I think it's varied, Manoj. I think for organizations, for everyone, this is something very new. And I think, for organization, what is most a priority? It has to be the people. They're people, clients, stakeholder. We're all in this together. And I think for organizations, it's really about prioritizing health and safety for employees first. Really messaging that and ensuring that employees are safe. And I think, going to Monica's point of some people feeling lonely, some people feeling isolated, I think that's very real. But how have companies really been trying to connect with their teams? This whole use of technology and connecting virtually. It was something that companies were using. I think now we've just been thrusted to use it. But how do we leverage technology to our advantage? And I think things like sharing our screen really helps. So you have that face-to-face interaction. And also, I've heard that when people get on calls with their team members, it's not just let's go straight into the work and the tasks. It's actually about spending time. The most common phrase used when we greet people is, "Hi, how are you? What's up? How's it going?" But do we allow people time to really express how they're genuinely feeling? And, on the whole work front, Monica talked about productivity. Well, I think it's also about saying to people, let's not talk about work. Let's have a virtual coffee. Let's do a virtual quiz. Let's have a virtual happy hour. And, making sure that primarily employees and their families feel that they have a voice, feel that they can speak up. And it's a struggle because I think a lot of companies, without realizing, have to prioritize this, and this has just suddenly become at the forefront of things. And it's about just trying new things, being innovative, and just working with technology as an enabler.
So, Paul, one of the things, the very interesting point that you mentioned was that expressing, employees need to express. And you've transcended cultures from a people perspective. Yes. And in India, it is often said as a complaint that employees don't express themselves. And it is left to the organization to find that they are suffering from some problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
Employees will largely, if you in a normal town hall meeting, would say, "You should have known that I have this problem."
Yeah.
So when the expressions don't come out, and in particularly such serious times when there's a drastic shift in the way we are living, and there is a resultant mental health issues, particularly, and distresses, and we know that employees are not going to express. How can organizations therefore find and detect those signs that there is a need for them to be proactive in helping their employees?
Absolutely. Great question, Manoj. And I think you rightly said, from a cultural context, Indians have been taught to respect their elders, not to question authority. And that is something that's ingrained in the Indian culture. And in terms of showing emotion, it's shown as a sign of weakness if you show your true feelings. And we have roles that are traditionally defined. So what can companies do to work through that? And I think that is where organizations need to impart workshops, trainings to help, especially people managers, coach their employees. And what I mean by coaching is really creating a safe space where people feel comfortable to truly open up. It may not happen overnight, but to truly allow an individual to create a space where they feel I feel comfortable to share my feelings. And I think people managers also have to empower people. We live in a society that celebrates success, but we're scared of failure. And I think that word itself, failure, is such a negative, has such a negative impact because you pass or fail exams at school or at college. But recognizing that all of us are human beings, recognize that failures, mistakes are part of our learning. And also, as we talk about companies and people wanting career growth and progression, we also must realize we have to go within. And for us to go within, it's a journey of almost putting everything on pause, unlearning, relearning, and moving forward. Because I think, this term mental health, it's so broad and it's so deep. But how do we start changing the culture? How do we start getting people to talk more about taboo topics? And, I think we have to start somewhere. And, certainly there are, companies that are doing phenomenal work in this area. But I think as Indian companies, it's about breaking tradition. It's about breaking through cultural barriers, which won't happen overnight. But I think mental health certainly is such an important topic. I don't think it's something that's suddenly come up. It's always been there, but more so people are talking about it. More so it's coming to the forefront. And the more we talk about it, the more we have webinars such as these, the more we can share content, the more we can share personal stories. That is how we are going to change and evolve as a culture.
Thank you, Pearl. Monica, you have been designing people strategies for several organizations, and in identifying key focus areas for designing people strategies, health in general and mental health has not been there earlier. When do you think this really became an important part? And White Swan has been really seeing a huge transformation that I would say over the last 1.5 years or so, where a lot of organizations have said that we can't just say that putting access to a service provider would absolve me of all responsibility towards my employees' mental health and wellness. So when did that whole shift happen, Monica?
Sure. My sense is that, as you said, over the last year and a half, that conversation is getting a little more mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the pandemic's also served to normalize to a very significant extent these conversations around mental health in the workplace. Having said that, I think I've heard of folks talking about, as you said, if there are in organization service providers that have, say, therapists in office available, around what percentage of usage is that getting, can we do a targeted sort of communication exercise to get those numbers up? What are India specific conversations that we need to have? So for instance, possibly do we talk about things like safety at home? So, domestic safety, and is that something, and or are there questions around emotional wellness and allied issues coming out of that need to be supported, that's specific to geography, etc. So those are conversations that I've seen rising over the last 3 or 4 years, and as I said, I think it's really come to a head at this point where it's become something that we can no longer ignore, irrespective of organization's journey or size or any of those parameters.
Is there a business case for the focus that the organization must have on employees' wellness, particularly mental wellness? Is there a business case?
There's a very clear business case, I would think. Yeah. So everything
Yeah.
from, ensuring that the talent that people have worked so hard to hire is retained, making sure, I mean, there's a direct impact on productivity, right? So that's right there, a business case saying, what do we do to make sure that if we are asking people to give them, 8 hours plus uh, of their week, what do we do to ensure that they are able to bring their best selves and the selves that we identified as potentially, what makes them suitable for us and the work we're looking at them doing. What do we need to do to make sure that they're bringing all of that to the organization? So I think there's a very clear business sense for ensuring that we're integrating um, a powerful system of predictable, available emotional health component built into the employee life cycle. Yes.
Well, you had a point to make on how is EY looking at, from a business perspective, to make sure that employee well-being, particularly mental well-being, is a matter of focus for them.
Yes, and I would say, from our perspective, it's number one priority. And, having the well-being of employees is so paramount important. It's everything. It's to do with productivity. It's to do with talent retention, motivation. And as for companies, it's not just critical, it's essential, I would say, because at the end of the day, you are hiring employees who you want to bring best to their work. And having mental health there, as Monica said, it's very real. And having, offering services to employees to ensure that there are, professionals who can help. That's one aspect, certainly. But I think as an organization, it's about creating workshops. It's about making sure that it is part of the culture, that employee well-being, employees should feel it. It shouldn't be just something that's on a poster. They should feel it, they should sense it, they should be able to feel comfortable, to feel that they can talk about any challenge that is bothering them. And let's face it, work-life integration is such a big topic. And I think especially now, as people are still working from home, that's a lot of people are struggling that. They struggled with work-life integration when they were at the office. They're struggling now. And I really feel that when we talk about mental wellness, it's very hard to define, but somebody, for example, could be suffering from anxiety because they have a presentation or they have a meeting. So that's something one-off. Or anxiety could be that, every time I have a meeting, this is a pattern. It's a pattern of behavior. And then you go through looking at things such as, depression and things that get more and more severe. But I think it's about individuals as well, recognizing how am I feeling? What is it that I can do, and what are the resources available in my company and externally that I can leverage? And while the journey of wellness has started, there is far more that organizations can do and must do. And, now is the time to really deep dive and really show that companies must show that they do care. Health and safety has to be number one priority for all their employees.
Yes. So this is good. So in the first part of our discussion, we clearly established through the inputs that you have provided, Paul and Monica, that there is an increasing focus on employees' well-being, mental well-being particularly, and there are clear reasons as to why that needs to be done. Let's move on to the current situation about COVID-19 and the lockdown. One of the questions that we have on our screen is about the pros and cons of working from home. Now, I have a question as a precursor to that. It's about how prepared were we to be working from home as an employee, I would say. Of course, the knowledge industry and a few other sectors were a little privileged, but that they could seamlessly move into a work from home environment. Not every industry, but even there, Has organization been asking those questions that have we prepared our employees from a training perspective, particularly, Paul, that, have we trained them to be able to work from home? What does it mean? So if you can highlight on those, Paul, you could start.
Sure, certainly. Great question. You know, like you mentioned, there are some organizations that already had working from home 1 or 2 day a week. And that was almost seen as a benefit for employees. So those who were able to do that, I think in a way transitioned easier. Did organizations have time to prepare people to work from home like this? No, is the answer. But I do feel organizations did react well, or as best as they could. I think there was a lot of information on how best to working from home, such as, you know, creating your own temporary office space at home, creating your own time for yourself, creating time that you connect with friends as well, making sure that you are able to do exercises and eat properly. So I do feel organizations have been delivering. More importantly as well, how do you suddenly conduct meetings? How do you deliver trainings virtually as well? So in a way, while I think industries were progressing that way, it's something that we automatically had to do. Suddenly training materials that you conducted face-to-face had to be converted to virtual programs. So I think the need to react, companies have had to be agile. When we talk about leadership, it is about showing that you care and support for your people. And like I said earlier, about leveraging technology as an enabler. Is it that everyone is comfortable working from home today? No. But how do we ensure that it's about changing and helping people with their mindset? And I think, with productivity, with people, working 12, 13 hours a day, how do you sustain that? And I think also to impart things like leave, we have vacation, but are people taking their leaves? Probably not, because they probably think, what would I do? Why not? In fact, I took some of my leaves a few weeks ago, more because I had to than wanted to. But it did me the world of good, Manoj. Being able not to have a work agenda, being able to switch off, being able to do the things that I want to do, just being and focusing on myself really was important. So I do feel companies have been trying to do their best. They have been trying to get their people managers to instill that as well. And I think overall, there's been a lot of information on social media to help support people as well. And while we're talking about work from home, we're also transitioning to another phase of possibly returning back to work as well. But who knows when that will be.
That's correct. Yeah, that's right. Monica, so from the work from home thing, what have organizations need to, what kind of education, what kind of training should organization and people officers must have to be able to get their employees en masse work from home?
Right. So the technology and productivity tool readiness aside, and training on that aside,
yes,
I would say also one of the essential parts is to kind of make sure that people have the, so if you think of it from a Maslow's hierarchy sort of perspective, do they have a physical home office? Is there space for them to make that happen? Mm-hmm. So for instance, I recall a couple of weeks into the remote working option, we ensured that people got the hardware that they needed, and people who couldn't, after the lockdown ended, then we made sure that that happened with people. Or give them a work from home. The other thing that worked was to say, here's a one-time work from home fund, and use that to do something that would improve your infra to set up a home office. So those are, fundamental. Just make sure that you're ready to start working from home sort of options. And some of the groups to watch out for. People who have care of, so specifically women who have care of children, as well as home responsibilities and possibly responsibility of elders in the family as well. to make it clear to them, instead of, them coming and saying, listen, I might not be able to give 8 hours, to say that, wherever possible, that we recognize that you will not be able to, because there isn't that physical distancing of going to the office, there will be demands on your time, and there will be, things that you'll not be able to do. And what does that mean? Is that okay? And, kind of put together possibly a set of guidelines so that that's clear to specific groups that might, and not just women with responsibility or families, even people who say moved cities to work wherever they're working and might not have possibly, so they're learning to say cook because during the lockdown they have to kind of fend for themselves, right? And if you're told that you have 1 hour of lunch, during that lunch time they have to first go figure out how to forage and then put it together and then eat it and then clean up and then come back to work, and they're like, I'm ready for a nap now. Right? And those are new skills that they're figuring out. So all of those are, so looking at specific groups inside the organization and saying, what are their specific requirements, what are their realities, and what do we do to kind of proactively say, oh, if that's something you're struggling with, instead of it becoming an issue and then us saying we'll do something about it, can we sort of, assume that there are other people who are probably struggling the same way that these set of people are. And, to kind of go back to a point that Pearl was making earlier, possibly not talking about it, not feeling comfortable to talk about it because it's considered unprofessional to say, I don't know how to make lunch, eat lunch, and clean up in 1 hour and be back at my desk. So yeah, so those are some spaces, and kind of going slightly forward in that, in those list of hierarchies, what are people looking for is possibly also, what do I do during this time to strengthen myself? So possibly, so something else that I tried as an experiment and that at this point has worked really well is weekly sessions, 1 hour each, on say resilience and building resilience. And these are open conversations with some agenda and maybe some framework, but talking about experiences on how I overcame a tough situation, so that people realize that, hey, I've been through it too. Doesn't matter whether I'm 22 and starting my career or, whatever, because when you talk about resilience, you tend, I've noticed people saying that, but I'm so privileged, I've not had those problems. Think of possibly those migrant workers walking home. So yes, so, without, taking away from that, kind of getting people to go inward and saying, okay, so how do I deal with uncertainty? What are skills that I need to put in place to be able to deal with uncertainty, to bounce quickly from setbacks? How to identify what news to receive, what news to digest? How do I strengthen mental muscles of response and not, immediate emotional reaction? So all of those are, I think, spaces that have opened up very immediately on skilling up.
That's a very interesting point, actually, Monica, that's talking about resilience. In general, before this COVID era, at workplaces, we used to have some of our coping mechanisms present there. Sometimes the problems could be in some other place, but we had some coping mechanisms available at workplaces.
Yeah.
It could be community, it could be work itself sometimes,
Yep. Yeah.
Now, many of them are suddenly lost to us. And therefore, people grapple with building ability to create newer coping mechanisms, or look at their current spheres, which probably will be narrower in the opportunities that they could offer. Do organizations understand that aspect and say that it's not just about saying that tomorrow start working from home? There are a whole lot of other things, dynamics that have changed. And how do you get people's strategies be tweaked to make sure that we have to therefore help people think of, adapt with newer coping mechanisms?
Yeah. So I would think if you're looking at what do organizations need to do systemically, and if we had to sort of say, take a timeline on that immediately. So as soon as we say that, okay, looks like work from home or remote working is here to stay, or even if you're saying, some organizations are choosing to come back to work, to go back to something that Pearl said earlier, just put safety of the workforce as something as something absolutely paramount, and say, do these people need to be in the office? What frequency do they need to be there in? What are systems that we need to reset. So the reset is real, right? So if my old systems don't allow me to say, if there's a leave policy based on physical swiping, right? And that doesn't work for me, I let it go. Similarly, what are old systems that will not serve anymore, and kind of look at those from a systems perspective and say, what do we need to do to ensure that our people are able to function comfortably while not being in the office? So how do we change the way we work so that I'm giving people responsibility of delivery, I'm giving them accountability of that delivery, and they are very aware of the gap in autonomy that they walked into, right? And what do managers immediately that they're reporting into, what do they need to do differently to be able to receive the work back? What support systems do they have? All of those, I think, become, again, fairly immediate. And something that Pearl touched upon earlier, which was, she spoke about coaching, and that, to my mind, is, again, paramount to saying, how do we really bring in conversations around autonomy to people, and trust that this person knows how to solve their problems. Maybe all they need is the right set of questions to be able to solve those problems for themselves. Yeah,
Right.
so I'd say immediately, possibly those, and over a period of time, then really look at how do we make emotional wellness conversations, how do we look at it as an investment in future productivity, and what does that mean for us in terms of guidelines that we're developing, in terms of policies that we're thinking of evolving. So for example, onboarding future hires remotely, how do we hold space for people in weekly all hands meetings? How do we make sure that it goes beyond how are you, I'm fine, but what do we do to make sure that there are conversations going on with people to make up, as you asked, for the fact that we are not face to face with each other.
Thank you, Monica. So before we move on, there are some interesting questions that have come up on our chat window. Let me pick up, and this is a very important point, I would say. The question here is about leaders at all levels are key to the mental health of employees. How do we make sure that they are sensitized to the various aspects, and also how do we enable them to actively deal with this? Now, I think there are two aspects to leadership, I would say, and particularly what we have also seen is that the middle layer of larger organizations is extremely crucial, and they're like the pillars of when we look at employee mental health. And many a time they're the joining force between the top leaders and the employees and workforce. So from a training perspective, Pearl, I mean, how do you think leaders could be prepared to deal with this?
I think that's a great question. I think it's everyone's responsibility, certainly in any organization. Certain messages around culture, how things have to be, how people have to behave, has to come from the top. And I feel, like I said at the beginning, I think it's imperative that there are workshops on defining what is mental health, and defining that it is very real in our workspace, in our communities, in our neighborhood. 4 out of 10 people suffer from depression. 89% of workforce are going through it. But do we know about that? And, so one is workshops, understanding what it means, but also I feel, how do we start encouraging people to talk about this topic? And I think a lot of the times it should be done informally. So while we have trainings and modules, are people applying it in the workplace? So I think the need to have champions to talk about it, to promote it, to share stories. People love stories, to hear stories. Do we have allies? Do we have people who are bold enough to say, I was worried about XYZ, or I suffered from anxiety, I suffered from depression? And I think it's only then that we have a powerful strategy in place, we have leaders talking about it, and that everyone understands the importance of wellness, and especially mental wellness. And I think it's a journey. I think it shouldn't be just about it shouldn't just be about metrics, but I think it should be about connecting on a humanistic level and really bringing it to the forefront, prioritizing it, any opportunity, whether it's in larger forums where leaders are addressing their team members, whether it's team meetings, whether it's over a coffee. I think the need to be able, one, to identify it, then two, talk about it, and then three, what are some of the ways that people can overcome, some of the tools that are there? What are some of the services that are out there? That's, I feel it has started to happen in pockets of industries, but certainly has to be priority moving forward.
Thank you. Monica, I mean, have you had conversations with leaders on what they should do about employee mental health, and how easy and or tough was the conversation?
A nice question. So my stomping grounds have also been smaller organizations, and
Yes,
therefore,
yes.
and therefore it's, I think, for me, been easy to have these relatively easier to have these conversations with folks where where the interaction with others is built in to the to the way the organization is. So you sort of know what's happening with everybody, and therefore it's easier to say, listen, you notice this happened, and then you talk about instances that happened, and talk about which of those could have an emotional health angle, and therefore what do we need to do about it, and then kind of sensitize to saying, that could be us, that could be you, that could be me. And that's one way that's worked. I found that so two specific observations. One is that I think generations that have grown up listening to or watching media, television, where even if it's Western primarily, about people meeting a therapist or being in therapy, etc., I think are just a lot more open to having those conversations, or even engaging with the terminology, talking about, is this something that could be happening to me, etc. And therefore, if I have people like that working with me in my team, there's only so long that I can kind of look away, and therefore it becomes something that I have to also get comfortable with, so as to be able to engage with them. So that's been one experience, that wherever there are quite often I see leaders learning from their team members to have this conversation, to kind of struggle with any taboo that they might feel in their head, and say, oh, all right, if you're talking about it, maybe let's listen in. So that's one thing that I've observed happening. The other, I think, is also, so for me, a space of specific challenge has been to get the leaders to kind of look inward and say, is this a conversation I should get involved in as well? And part of it, I think, is also because especially folks who are folks who start organizations, right, tend to be a lot more gung-ho and very comfortable with uncertainty, right? And therefore slightly tougher audience to sell, not the idea of mental wellness itself, but possibly the fact that maybe it's okay to be vulnerable, ask for support that you need, etc. So to my mind, I think where the connecting factor is that when I see my leaders being vulnerable, I will find it a lot more easier to be vulnerable, right? And when I see them leading and saying, I had a tough day today, I just did not want to come to work today, right? Then I would feel comfortable saying it. Yeah. So I think that for me is an area of ongoing sort of work across generations. Yeah. But I think I'm also seeing, as soon as you introduce the idea that the minute you're vulnerable, then you're modeling that to others, is also a very very comfortable idea for folks to understand and say, all right, so maybe I need to do that. And then I will see my team members, irrespective of cultural conditioning, open up and talk a little bit more about what's going on with them. And then when they see that interplay happen, then it's a lot more, then it sort of makes a, builds on itself. So yeah, so that's been my
Those are
experience.
very powerful, very important points out there, actually. And in our learning also, we've been interacting with several organizations now, and we clearly have seen that there is a need for leaders to have a very rounded understanding of the complexities involved in the mental health of an employee and build huge empathy towards it. Because if there are issues coming out, they should be able to say that this is how I demonstrate empathy there. And why they need to speak up is also because there is a huge need to create communication channels. And it's not just one way. I mean, you can't apply communication channels that you've created for other purposes in an organization to say that I can replicate in mental health. It will not work like that. So you have to create and recreate, develop, because sometimes it will be one-on-one, some junior most employee is reaching out to the senior most employee. You have no idea, and completely lateral communication channels need to be created. So that's why leaders' role becomes pivotal, I would say, in ensuring that employee mental wellness is taken care of in an organization. Thank you so much. That's a really important point. There are questions coming up again about, somebody wants to know about your experience, from your experiences, about some broad examples of efforts Indian companies have taken towards looking into mental well-being of their workforce in general. Of course, at one end, particularly, again, I would say that in the knowledge space and all, you have things like gym and other things, and being said, I mean, you will say that, okay, they are for the well-being of my employees. But I think organizations have begun to understand this much more to be done. So have you been seeing some very innovative, one or two innovative steps organizations have taken to take care of their employee mental well-being particularly? Paul, you could
Yes,
pick up the question.
sure, certainly. You know, in my previous organization, Manoj, and this is going back, what, 6-7 years ago, I remember the company arranged for a counselor to come in and helped us understand if someone in your team is feeling suicidal, what do you do? And I was like, and we were all quite taken aback of just even the thought of having a training around that. In terms of some of the, you know, other innovative areas, you know, we have introduced things like meditation, mindfulness. And I think that's so important because when we think of mindfulness, our mind is full of to-do lists, deadlines, meetings, projects. It's full. But how do we help employees calm their mind? Yeah, create space in their mind. And you know, I personally have conducted some of these sessions as well, and I wasn't sure how it would go. Would people enjoy it? Would, especially for the younger generation, would they switch off, find it boring? But I have to say, people have really taken to it. And if anything, they've said, can we have more sessions such as this? Yoga as well. People should be able to know, how do you sit? You know, posture. So I think the way to, you know, find what works for people, gone are the days, certainly now, that you are in a training room with a facilitator, have you know, virtual sessions. But I think, like I said before, sharing stories. Monica talked about leaders being vulnerable. And I think really so much can be done where you create a space where people see their leader, not because of his or her title or designation, but their leader as someone who has made mistakes, someone who has gone through certain challenges, and showing their vulnerability to their team members. And I think certainly in any relationship, you need to have trust. And again, trust is so important. But again, how do you know when you trust someone? I am also an NLP trainer. So I think imparting knowledge of how to use patterns of your brain and how that impacts your language. So I think there's so many different techniques out there, so many different things like pranic healing or Reiki. And I think allowing employees to explore what is it that resonates with them. And I think that is what companies need to do, not say this is what we think, but reaching out to employees saying, you know, what is it that you've heard? What is it that you're interested? And we've seen so much diverse talent from employees that we probably wouldn't have realized had we not asked them. So I think we're really unraveling a new way of learning, a new way of digesting information, and asking people to explore which aspect of that certain solution works with them to help them ease their mind, to help them ease with whatever challenging that they are facing. But as Monica mentioned as well, how to be resilient, because that's what it is. In the face of adversity, how do you cope? And that's quite a challenging challenging thought. But as human beings, we have so much potential right here, right now. How do we unlock that potential for so many employees? So interesting times, but a lovely time to also innovate, be creative, and to be curious to learning as well.
Monica, any other innovative steps you have seen organizations taking towards employee mental well-being?
Sure. So to kind of add on to what Pearl was saying, I think something that I thought was very powerful was to just ask people, what aspects of your emotional wellness journey do you need support with? Is a great start, so that's one that comes to mind. The other was to make resources available, like I said, in a systemic manner. So get a partnership going with experts, contextualize with the partners what's the organization's reality, so that there's depth available with the partners who are experts and who then take on conversations, and there's confidentiality built in, etc. So the people in the organization know that this isn't one of those conversations where I go and open up to somebody and then suddenly it makes an appearance in my performance evaluation, right? None of that. And having done that, having set the stage, defer to the experts, step away, and then say, that they come back and let me know what's going on. Maybe give me a sense of the pulse of the organization. But for the most part, bringing in expertise that possibly the people function, not possibly, people function on a 100% basis will not have, and therefore bringing in that strength into the organization.
Yeah, so this is good, and thank you for those inputs. And I think we should now move to the last part of our discussion, which is about coming back to office, coming back to our workplaces. There is a lot of apprehension about it. Probably it was easier to get employees to start working from home, but to get them back to office is not going to be as easy probably. And a lot of apprehension is there. How do you think organizations can prepare themselves and prepare their employees to feel safe to be coming to office and work like they used to in the pre-COVID era? Monica, you could start with your input.
Sure. So I think start with the question: does everybody need to be in the organization, in the physical office space? Can we maybe get them in batches? How do we ensure that? So just essentially answer the question: what are their fears? If their fears are around, there will be overcrowding in the office, there will be other people in my space. How do we solve for that? Also ask questions like, just ask people, what's your number one fear about coming back to office? Some of the things that I've heard people do, which are quite stellar, are check with people, how are they coming into the office? Because once they're at work, the assumption is the organization's done their bit to ensure physical safety, there's distancing, etc. So how are they getting into work? So if they're taking public transport, then that's clearly going to be a worry for them. So how do we resolve that? Yeah, is there a way for people who tend to take public transport to then maybe stay back at home? Are potential solutions? But I would say, yeah, so if the governing principle is kind of look at what are the concerns, and then kind of looking at solutions arriving out of that, and keeping both physical safety of the employee and making sure that they don't have higher risk because they're coming into office to COVID-19, as well as equally important to say, is coming to office causing them anxiety? Is it causing them to feel so tense? Or are there people at home who don't have support of, say, childcare, right? So are there parents who are coming into work or are required to come into work, and there's nobody at home to take care of their children? So what are we doing to kind of bridge that gap? I would think those primarily.
Paul, I think a lot of the IT industry organizations and knowledge focused organizations are saying that we are not yet ready. And probably it's a few months away when we would ask our employees to probably come back to offices. But that may not be the advantage that many other industry may have. And if we are going to see the issue not going away, but employees are going to go back to offices, emotional distress cases may probably arise. People will have to deal with the situation, and even as they go back to start their work life. How do you think, and particularly in such situations, the powerful role middle managers will play becomes extremely crucial, because that's where detection can happen. That's where the last mile communication can happen to employees and all. So, Paul, in larger organizations like EY, I mean, of course, EY is not the right example. Then you may not be thinking of starting to work from office, but larger organizations in general, how do they prepare their middle managers to be ready to create an environment which is emotionally safe for their employees?
Absolutely. And I think first off, you mentioned that middle managers have to be aware, but I feel middle managers also will have their own fears and anxieties. And I think absolutely people, one, I think have to have clear, open conversations with their organizations. Do they have to come back to work? Number one. Number two, I think organizations have to be very clear. What is it that the companies are doing to ensure employee safety? Are they connecting with government guidelines? Are they ensuring, sanitization, masks? And I think going back to Monica's point, it's most people's fear is not the workplace. It's probably getting to work, being on public transport, coming back from work as well. If you live with, if you have young kids, if you have elderly parents. And I feel, these are very genuine and real concerns that people have. But I think it's important for managers to really, and I think we underestimate this word empathy. It's such a beautiful, simple word, but are people managers empathizing with people's problems? Are people able to listen to the genuine concerns of people? People have enjoyed the flexibility. Can certain organizations extend that flexibility? And I think it's really about looking and saying, look, a few months ago, we were all in lockdown, period. We could not step out. Now restrictions are opening. People are able to go out. They are able to go for a walk or to run. Certain shops are opening. So slowly things are getting back to the new normal. And to recognize that, as things progress, hopefully things will get better. But again, companies need to strongly message, and I don't think they can over communicate. Priority is number one for their employees. Employees also likewise need to take accountability of voicing their concerns. And how do you bridge that gap where employers and employees are communicating and not being judged? And it's a responsibility each one has to identify, and looking out for what are the things you can do. And I'll share an example of where this didn't go right. One of my friends actually, was complaining so much work to do, working long hours and not having an approachable boss. And just last week, they were told, and in this manner, in this way, that here are your options. Either you come to the office and you get your full salary, or you continue to work from home, but your salary will be halved. So, then my friend called me yesterday and said, you know what, I've quit. She said, I cannot work in an organization like that does not value me. And I think as leaders in that organization, what message are they sending to their employees? I think that company should be here on this webinar today, Manoj. But there's a lot of learning that leaders have to go through, a lot of introspection, people managers, and recognizing that today more than ever, that community of support having a community there, having someone you can talk to, sharing your voice is of paramount of importance.
Thank you, Pulden. So we are coming towards the end of our discussion. We've touched upon a whole range of the new normal from a workplace perspective and from an employee well-being perspective. And I think I would like to capture, before we talk about the book, I would like to capture your views about what has permanently changed from a people perspective towards employee well-being, people practices towards employee well-being over the last 3 months because of the current situation. What has permanently changed? When we go back to our work, we will not be going back to our pre-COVID era in terms of our thinking, in terms of our leadership approach to well-being, any of those. I mean, could you just think about it? Could you probably narrate a few of those points that you feel have permanently changed? Pearl, you could start with.
I think how much we put limitations on our own mindset. One of the things I think people were worried about, how will people work from home? How will they be productive? How will it worked? So I think recognizing our own limitations. I think secondly, also realizing that actually, you know what, having this flexibility is a wonderful benefit. And if you can continue to work from home or in another location, why not? And I think what COVID has shown us is that, nothing stays the same forever. We have to be able to face our challenges, face adversity. And the more we can face it head on, the easier it will be. And I think really for people to recognize and understand that what is it that I can do to create a life that is meaningful and happy for myself. It's not just about work and the deliverables and the deadlines. There has to be a much more bigger purpose. And I think for people, I'm hearing this word a lot more, purpose, passion. I think people want to be able to have something of value that they can show back. And I think that's going to stay with people as well.
Thank you, Paul. Monica, how would you put this too?
Yeah. So I think what's changed is the way we look at how do you give a team member accountability for the work that they need to do. So I think that's changed fairly permanently. As Pearl said, there were so many questions and concerns about would we be able to work remotely as effectively, and turns out that we can. So I think a lot of questions around, so if we can, then, shouldn't we use the times when we do meet people to move that relationship forward, to build stronger bonds, to work on maybe learning from each other's experiences, and not so much to kind of, even from a manager, team member perspective, not so much to monitor what's going on with that person and how are they working, but, can I kind of give them more accountability, more responsibility? And, so that I think is something that has huge potential for change as a result of what we've seen happening. And hopefully that stays in the minds of people that, I had so many people in my team who made my work so much easier, and I did not have to do, checking up with people and, verifying has this been done, etc. So I think that's a huge one. And the second, I think, is there's a certain blurring of boundaries of, what are things that I can talk about to my manager or to my colleagues, and what are things that, because this is a professional environment, I can't talk about. And answering the question, to go a little earlier back to what Pearl was saying, which is, how are you, is a question that you say, good, and you carry on with work, right? So one of the things that I think has very significantly changed is just a certain level of softness has come into what you would call a professional conversation, right? So there is space that's been created for conversations on how are you doing, on people's well-being. And I think that again is something that once that door opens, we're just all human. So I think it's going to be very difficult to close that door, and that I think is
Yes.
net a brilliant change.
Yes. And if I may also add, I mean, we have seen quite a lot of recession in the last 2 decades, and economic adversities and many other issues. But never have we really seen mental health taking the limelight. This was the first time, and we've had so many stories and so many incidences really being discussed, spoken about, leaders discussing this. and organizations' role in dealing with that. So those are very positive, I would say, results of the COVID pandemic and the lockdown and other things that have happened, which I think is going to really stay permanently. And how does it get addressed? What solutions come out of it? What innovation happened there is something that we will have to really see. And I'm sure organizations and leaders will really come out with very innovative solutions there. So thank you so much. This was really, really lovely, the discussion, and very valuable inputs, I would say, on a whole range of subjects that you've covered. I think this can potentially create significant shifts in the way society looks at mental health. More on that, we should cover in another episode of Moving Minds webinar. As I was mentioning at the beginning of the session, that White Swan has developed an ebook that will help organizations ensure that their employees feel emotionally safe to return to their offices, while a range of logistical steps are being put together by organizations to make sure that they get to keep themselves clean and create physical distancing. The lockdown and pandemic have been stressful experiences also to many employees. And we need to make sure that we address their apprehensions and make them emotionally safe in their offices. And how do we do that is what the book that we are going to release today covers, and a whole range of subjects. It talks about what organizations need to be aware of as employees return to work, and what communications organizations must make to ease employees' stress about returning to work, and many other very important aspects that we have covered there. So here is a cover page of the ebook that we will release. And as participants of this session, you will be one of the first ones to receive a copy of this on your email box today. Pearl and Monica, you've seen the book, and I would really love to have your comments, early comments about what you think the book really would serve the people officers, particularly in organizations, before they put their recommendations and norms together for their employees. Monica, if you could start.
Sure. So I really like the fact that it operates as a launchpad of sorts to say, are you sure you've thought of all of these aspects, right? And there could be elements that are not relevant to some organizations or to some demographics, and that's all right. But I just really like the fact that it operates as a start off to say that, we'd like you to, here's a thorough set of things, go through it, and from here build what's relevant for you and, customize it to your organization. But these are absolutely the essentials for you to keep in mind before you start, while you're thinking of heading back to the physical office space. So that for me really stood out. Yeah.
Thank you, Monica. Pearl?
Yes, Manu, I think, it's wonderful that White Swan has, taken the time and effort to put something together like this for organizations. And I think it's a useful tool for people just to reference and to also showcase to their team members, but to also take certain parts that they feel are pertinent. And again, what we've been talking about throughout this whole session, have meaningful conversations. Talk to people, look, this is what it says in here. How do we feel about this? And the book has very nicely laid out as well. It's an easy read. You can pick out points you want. It's done by experts. So I think it's a great tool that I hope people will leverage and use and share and circulate, because the more communities can get together, the more support, the more knowledge, the more information, collectively everyone will win. And it reminds me of that quote of sorry, I can't remember who said it, but it's instead of 100 people taking one step, it's about 100 people taking the first step. Wow. And it's about all of us together taking that first step.
Thank you. Those are lovely words. And thank you so much, Pearl and Monica, for joining us, and every participant. It was a really lovely discussion. I think we should continue this discussion. There's so much to be covered, and we will try and find ways to get you again for another discussion here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
With that, we sign off from the session. Thank you.